Look, I said I don't want any tea today, thank you.
I'm not the tea lady.
Then what the blazes are you doing in here? Don't you know this area is strictly out of bounds to everybody except the tea lady and the Brigadier's personal staff?
I'm your new assistant.
Oh, no.
Hello, welcome to Fast Return. I'm Sean.
And I'm Ethan. And today we're talking about Terror of the Autons.
We're sticking with the Auton theme.
Yes.
So we did Spearhead last week, Terrors this week, and then what's the next Auton story? Is it Rose?
Rose.
So they don't appear again after this?
No. They used them twice for 2 consecutive season openers.
For the same Doctor?
Yeah, and then booted them for some reason. But it's interesting that they never appeared at all after this, do you know? 2 years in a row, and then they just stopped appearing.
Having watched Spearhead and seen how terrifying they are in their own right, and they're very intelligent and they come up with their own invasion plan, they do feel like a bit of a plot device for the Master in this one, which is a shame, I think. Like, I love the Master. I love his introduction in this story. It's great. They sort of live in the Master's shadow a little bit.
They're servants, aren't they?
Yeah.
He says that. He says as much that they're his servants to Farrell.
It's so cool to see them return. They are like second billing to the Masters in terms of villainry.
What I think is interesting is how differently used they are. It's more like the idea that the Nestenes can put life into anything made of plastic. That's the main kind of like threat in this story, rather than like hordes of Autons like killing people. Do you know? Yeah,
they've branched out, haven't they, into inflatable chairs and daffodils that kill you and horrific looking dolls.
Exactly, yeah. So I think watching this after season 7 already feels quite different. But watching it after Spearhead, where there's some similarities, but also major differences, both in terms of like the tone and in terms of the way it looks, it really does highlight the differences the two stories have.
Even in small ways that I know they can't help, but when they filmed Spearhead, because there was that studio strike, they couldn't do any studio filming. The scenes of the Brigadier in his office were filmed on location, and they picked this grand building. So you have Liz Shaw coming down this actual long corridor into the Brigadier's office. And just that, even to have like the scope of that felt really like cinematic. And then you compare that to his office in this story, and it's literally like a backing wall and a little desk. You do miss the scale a little bit of even the smaller things like that.
I think Spearhead is funny because everything's got so much breathing space. Like you're introduced to these characters one by one, and it's got its own atmosphere, and it takes time to sort of build up each world for each of the characters. I think Terror, it is a lot more like kitschy, a lot more like kooky and a bit weird, and then it's chaotic in terms of like the pacing of it. It's like sometimes it feels quite slow, and other times it's like breakneck, where there's like 2 lines of dialogue in one scene and it goes somewhere else. Do you know? Structurally very different, and tonally as well. I
will say as well, it oozes with style, Terror. Like the visuals of it are so vibrant. To have the opening being set in a circus, and the Master materializing there in Horsebox. Love that. Like immediately you're drawn in. And this is one of Pertwee's favourite stories.
Is it?
Yeah, he said that they really nailed it with this one.
I didn't realise it was one of his favourites.
He said quite a few years later, he said this was one of our best.
Oh, right.
And I can definitely see that. It sets up the Master so well. Everything was served really well except the Autons. There was some really, really great character development where they introduced Joe.
You fall in love with her straight away, don't you?
You do, but the Doctor doesn't.
No.
But somehow in 4 parts you see their relationship grow to pretty much where it is from there on till the end. She like proves herself. He learns to trust her. He learns to care about her. Anyway, I don't want to go too into it.
No, that's fine.
It was written by Robert Holmes. He also wrote Spearhead.
Yes.
Directed by Barry Letts, who wasn't credited for directing, it says here.
Really?
Weirdly, yeah.
Oh, that's odd.
Script edited by Terrence Dicks. Music by Dudley Simpson. The music was standout as well, wasn't it? We started this story this morning. We spent the whole day singing.
Yeah.
around the house.
Yeah. It's funny with the music. So I said last time about how Spearhead has this really nice, like classy sort of 70s score. This is very much like full synthesizer territory with like buzzy, like slamming keyboard synths and that sort of stuff. But I think this is one of the stories where it really works in its favor because it adds to like the artificiality of it, like how clinical it all feels and the kitschiness of it. And I still think that a lot of the scenes that accompany like people being attacked or killed, they have that like sting where it's like the sort of synth sting, and it really makes it feel like creepy and unsettling. Like when you're watching like the troll doll thing running across the floor or the chair like melting into the guy. Do you know? It adds to like the kitschiness but sort of creepiness of it as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Alternate titles: The Spray of Death. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And the Autons were chosen to be brought back because they had been popular in their first appearance.
Yeah.
Barry Letts and Terence Dix wanted to add new characters. That was the outline for this story. They thought about how the Brigadier was like Dr. Watson to the Doctor's Sherlock and decided to devise a new character to emulate Moriarty. The Master was meant to specifically contrast with Pertwee's Doctor.
Oh.
And the Doctor was authoritative while the Master was charming. Though he used that for an evil purpose.
Right. Yeah. Oh, because to be fair, I didn't realise it, but Pertwee still has quite a bit of his season 7 like gruffness in this. He's so much more loosened up with everybody later into his tenure.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, he's quite like, when he's had enough of the Brigadier and the other soldiers, he doesn't mince his words, does he? He's like, right, off you go, the whole lot of you. But then with Joe, treats Joe differently after a while.
That's what I liked.
Yeah.
That was in sort of part 3. He just wanted to be left alone to work.
Yeah.
And he kicks everyone out in quite a rude way. And then Joe was like, oh, can't I help? And you expect him to be rude to her. And he completely softens his tone. He's like, no, dear, you go downstairs and find those bits for me and come back up.
Right, off you go, the whole lot of you.
Me too.
Yes, you too. No. Now you go down to the stores and see if you can chase up that Mr. Campbell, all right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And I like that. He does treat her differently.
Yeah. It's very warm. Like
Yeah.
by the end of it, it's very warm. And
He's doting on her straight away.
You can tell that he wants to look after her, even though she's maybe not perfect for the job. You can tell that, the relationship is already very warm. And he gets closer to Liz as season 7 goes on, but it's never quite like it is here, where there's that caring relationship to it. He's friends with Liz by the end of season 7, but it's not anything more than that, really.
I'm really, really excited to watch season 7. So we're waiting for the box set to come out, which comes out in March.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to that. So felt a bit of a shame today to watch this and to not know, what happens in the jump between Spearhead to this, because there's a whole season, isn't there?
Yeah.
But I did think that so this is the start of the next season 8.
Yeah.
I thought it still felt very fresh. The Doctor being exiled to Earth and working with the unit.
Yeah.
They're clearly still running on a full tank with that idea.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And all the characters are really settled and developed. And the Doctor and Brigadier's relationship is still great. It's played for a lot of laughs.
It's one of my favourite. I think it's one of my favourite stories for their relationship, actually.
But also, it's not all good. Like, I know we'll talk about it, but the Brigadier says to the Doctor he's prepared an aerial strike on the Auton bus.
Yeah.
And the Doctor disagrees with that. And the Brigadier pushes back on that and says, no, because if those Autons enter a populated area, I can't strike on them anymore. And that puts people in danger.
Yeah.
And he just leaves. So he goes against the Doctor. And then the Doctor's like, okay, well, how long till the strike? That's how long I've got to fix this. And I like that because it was like conflict between them in a way.
Faced with a problem, they blasted off the face of the earth.
What do you think we should do?
Nothing. Keep them under observation for a while. And give me a chance to find out the purpose of these flowers.
I'm sorry, Doctor. I can't afford to take that risk. If that coach moves to a populated area, it'll be impossible to destroy it. The strike will go ahead as planned.
Captain Yates.
Yes, Doctor?
How long have we got?
About an hour and a half. The Rath boys are setting things up now, and we have established an observation point at the quarry.
That's why it's so interesting, because they don't always get on. But you can tell, like, I think it's the way Nicholas Courtney plays it. Like, obviously, by this point, they were having a really good time. And that's why I love that scene in the office in, like, episode 2 or whenever it is, where it's like the Doctor and his mate, like examining stuff, and the Brigadier goes and like looking through the filing cabinet and stuff. It just feels very like they're friends, but they do have that clash as well occasionally.
Yeah, but there's also like an air of professionalism.
Yeah, still.
The Brigadier knows how to play the Doctor as well. When they introduce Jo and the Doctor doesn't want her as his assistant, and he says that when she's not in the room to the Brigadier, he says, she won't do. And the Brigadier says, that's fine, but you can tell her.
Yeah.
And then he just takes a step back and then the Doctor's like, okay, yeah, you can stay and do this for me. He couldn't bear to fire her himself.
Right, yeah.
And the Brigadier was like, I'm not doing the dirty work for you.
Yeah, you can tell her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad he gives her a chance.
Yeah.
Because she's lovely. And she proves herself a lot in this story.
I mean, I really love Liz Shaw, but I can see that you can see why Jo became so popular, can't you?
You can.
I mean, I like as well that so Dodo didn't get a leaving scene in 60s Who, and Liz doesn't get a leaving scene, but the way that they wrote her out, I like that it feels quite in character for Liz, where she was like, oh, I've had enough of this. I'm getting shot by aliens every week. I could just go and work in Cambridge. All the Doctor needs is someone to be his servant, basically. I'm off.
Yeah.
And so that feels quite like her, because she doesn't suffer fools, does she, Liz?
No.
And she's had enough. So she's just out, which is fair enough.
I do think she is categorically the most neglected classic companion. It feels like every other companion has had their moment, like even in dialogue in the show or Tales of the TARDIS. I know she's not with us anymore, but there's no one that feels the need to like expand. But her daughter's doing Big Finish as her, isn't she?
Caroline John, yeah. So Caroline John did a few Big Finishes while she was alive.
Oh, that's cool.
And I think that she enjoyed it, and they've done more with her since, but obviously it's played by, is it her daughter?
Yeah, which I like.
Yeah.
Because they've done the same for Elizabeth Sladen's
They get to carry on their
daughter.
legacy then, don't they?
Yeah.
When I said about how this story is very like kitschy and crazy, it's like even Terror of the Autons, I can't really imagine Liz fitting into this.
No.
Like, what would she have done when those Autons started getting off the bus with those carnival masks on?
She would have rolled her eyes. She would have been like, oh, here we go.
Alien invaders. Little blue men with 3 heads.
I do like how Jo, she does surprise you a lot in this story. She's introduced, and her character is that she's a bit fluffy, isn't she? Like, she doesn't have the credentials that Liz Shaw has, let's say.
Yeah.
For want of a better term. But then she's sort of introduced as like having the street smarts that Liz wouldn't have. I don't think Liz Shaw would have infiltrated the plastic factory or the plastic junkyard or whatever, where the Master had set up.
Initially, they wanted to show that she was chaotic and that she isn't afraid to act on impulse. Whereas Liz would be more methodical, wouldn't she?
Yeah.
And if the risk that Jo had taken in part 1 had paid off, they'd have found the Master immediately and known where the factory was.
No, and it did almost get everybody killed.
Yeah.
But, it's part and parcel. But
I think that's why it's really cleverly structured, where initially they are behind the Master's plans because of Jo. Jo does set them back initially by bungling it and getting hypnotized. But then later on, her kind of pushing forward and doing things of her own accord, i.e. going to the circus and saving the Doctor's life, when he's being tied up. It's like, that's why it's good that she's a bit unorthodox in her approach,
Yeah. She manages to call for help.
She goes and does things in her own way, which is chaotic and not necessarily what Liz would do. But that could be a good thing too sometimes. So I do think it's clever the way she's used. She comes across as a bit of an airhead in part 1, doesn't she? But then later on, not so much.
Yeah. And even like when they were tied up in the bus, the Doctor and Jo, and he says, oh, it's a shame your degree wasn't in escapism. And then all of a sudden she's free. She's managed to get herself free. Like, it surprises him. I think that's what he likes about her. Yeah. She's, like you say, a bit more unpredictable than Liz.
Yeah, definitely.
And
definitely.
That's definitely served well in this story for the most part, because she ends up saving his life a couple of times.
Yeah.
By being chaotic.
Yeah.
I like the horse box TARDIS. It's a shame you don't get to see inside of it this time, but I know that comes later.
At one point, the Master calls from the factory inside the horse box, and you see like the pipe wall, which is presumably the inside of his TARDIS. You don't get to see inside it properly until later.
It's a bit tantalising, isn't it?
But yeah, it's just like a little glimpse. But yeah, I mean, I always think in the classic series, whenever viewers were watching it back in the 70s and they hear that TARDIS noise, their ears must have pricked up because it's like, oh, like there's another TARDIS in the situation now, do you know? And they use it again when the Time Lord materializes at the start, you know, the incognito Time Lord in his suit.
Yeah. And it's a first for Pertwee's Doctor, isn't it? Because before this, there'd been no Time Lords appearing alongside the Doctor in season 7.
Yeah. Well, excluding the monk, this is the first time you see any Time Lord who's not the Doctor. Oh, except in War Games, obviously. But like, this is the first time they've appeared since the War Games, and that War Games is only their first proper appearance. Do you know?
There was quite a few like camp characters, like the circus owner.
There's loads.
Who the heck are you?
Who the heck are you? Well,
I am usually referred to as the Master.
oh, is that so?
Universally.
Well, I am Luigi Rossini, internationally, and conjurers I don't need, okay?
Unfortunately, I need you, Russell.
What did you call me?
Yeah.
Smoking his fat cigar.
Yeah. And then when the Master's like, I know you, Hugh Russell, and he just stops using the accent, it just reverts to his normal voice when he gets called out by the Master.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's got a functioning TARDIS.
Yeah.
So the chameleon circuit actually works, and it can actually travel in at the beginning anyway.
Yeah.
The Doctor soon fucks him over.
Yeah.
The idea is that the Master's tracked the Doctor down because is his old nemesis.
Yeah.
First on screen appearance.
Yeah. They've got a relationship from before this episode.
It was funny. He was always like 10 steps ahead. The Doctor had no idea the Master was even there, and the Master had like obtained the Nestene ball thing.
Yeah. He'd
created Autons. He'd infiltrated a factory, killed the owner. He was like 10 steps ahead. It sets him up really well as definitely a Moriarty type, like an equal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's using his acumen for nefarious reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was funny when Rossini thought that the Master was a magician.
Yeah. And conjurers I don't need.
Yeah. You could quite easily make that mistake, to be fair. He's got a very magician-y look about him.
Yeah. I like it when the Irish guy who is the factory, like the new owner. So you know how when Mr. Farrell Sr. retired, Rex is like owning the factory, but there's a head of production who's McDermott, who's the Irish guy.
Yeah.
And when he's like, so you're a magician as well as a colonel, are you? And he's like, I am many things. So he doesn't deny it.
No. So more than one person thinks he's a magician.
Yeah.
That's great. So Joe's introduction's great. The Doctor thinks that she's a tea lady.
Yeah.
And he's trying to fix...
Liz would have slapped him.
Yeah, she would have. He's trying to fix his dematerialization circuit.
Yeah.
Which is a gorgeous little prop, which they have shown in the new series.
Yeah. And it's one of the few times in the classic series when a part of the TARDIS or a prop is consistent across the episodes, because it reappears later on in a future story several times, I think, actually, and it's always the same prop that's used, or a similar looking prop.
The Doctor sort of tries to fix it, and there's a bit of smoke and kerfuffle, and Jo takes it upon herself to use a fire extinguisher on it.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
It's all right, I've dealt with it.
Dealt with it? You've ruined it.
But your match was on fire.
3 months delicate work, and now look at it, you ham-fisted bun vendor.
But this whole place might have gone up in flames.
My dear young lady, steady-state micro-welding always creates more smoke than fire.
Steady-state micro-welding?
Yes. An advanced engineering technique pioneered by the Lamardines. A remarkably gifted race that had 9 opposable digits.
9 what?
9 opposable digits. Yes, well, never mind.
When the third Doctor is like berating her, it is so funny.
She's like, I fixed it. He's like, fixed it? You've ruined it, you ham-fisted bun bender.
Oh, God.
You've ruined it.
It's great.
Yeah, she gets off on the wrong foot with him, doesn't she, at first? Bless her heart.
She does. It was a bit strange that Liz Shaw's exit is so like nonchalant. But I guess at this point, they'd gone back to like not being very sentimental with companions and exits and things like that. Like even in Hartnell's, his first companions to leave, Barbara and Ian, they got a very sentimental exit. So did Susan.
Yeah.
And I don't know about Charlton. I mean, his companions didn't bloody leave, did they?
Well, Polly and Ben kind of get written out a little bit, but basically the only ones that really got mishandled in the 60s was Dodo. She got written out and didn't appear, in the War Machines. The Doctor like sends her out of town to get away from the influence of like Wotan, which is like controlling her, if you remember that. And then she just decides to stay in the country and doesn't come back. So that's a bit crap. And then the other companions, they all get really good departures in 62, to be fair. Victoria, Zoe, Jamie, they all get really good departures. It's Liz and Dodo are the two that people say got a bit mishandled in terms of leaving stories, really.
She put in a whole season, do you know? She did deserve a bit of a better send-off, really.
Yeah, she did, really. But she got 4 cracking stories, and then she gets written out in a way that feels like it's in character for her, do you know? Which is more than can be said for like Dodo. She just disappears.
So the Doctor's hot on the heels of, well, actually, he's stone cold on the heels of the Master. And he's investigating the radio transmitter.
Business, yeah.
And that's when he meets, it's just called Time Lord. And it's just like a message, isn't it, from his people that says,
the Master's arrived on this planet. He says something like that.
Yeah, he said, I've come to warn you. And the Time Lord says he'll certainly try to kill you. The tribunal thought that you ought to be made aware of your danger, which is quite considerate of them, to be fair.
Yeah.
So that paints him in quite a good light this time.
Yeah.
It's immediately camped up because the Time Lord warns the Doctor that the Master's learned a great deal since he last met him.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's like, I refuse to be worried by a renegade like the Master. He's an unimaginative plodder. And then the Time Lord's like, well, his degree in cosmic science was a higher class than yours, to be fair. And the Doctor's like,
Yes, well, I was a late developer.
The Time Lord gets a few little digs in, and then when things start to go wrong, it's just like, no, I'm not helping you. Bye.
I thought, well, that was so great. It was so well played.
Yeah, it's funny because the kind of like kitschiness of it and the 70s-ness of it is on full display the minute the Time Lord appears, because he materializes like too far away from the telescope, doesn't he?
He's like, oh, my coordinates must have slipped. And he's just floating above.
And then he just like
nothing.
He just like moves into frame. Just like pans towards the frame, doesn't he?
He's like, stay there.
Yeah.
And he just floats towards him. It's nuts. It is crazy, but it's good fun.
Yeah, so we've got one of the instances of the funny CSO being used where the Master breaks into that museum.
Yeah.
Which I can see from the script is the National Space Museum. But it's like 2 really quick shots, isn't it, of like a hangar background and then a cabinet that's being filmed from above in quite a tight shot.
Yeah.
So the Master smashes it and he takes the Nestene sphere, doesn't he?
He does.
But yeah, that all happens so quickly. It's like, oh, I didn't even realise that's really what happened. Yeah. I just realised that he broke into wherever was holding the sphere and just nabs it. But it's Rossini that knocks the attendant out. That tries to stop him. So quick. But it's nice that the prop, they've got that direct consistency from the previous season. Because again, it's quite rare in Classic Who that way they bother to make things look the same. I don't know if it's the same prop or not, but it looks very similar. But I suppose that makes sense as to why the Nestenes haven't got the upper hand this time. They're not as powerful because there's only one sphere.
Yeah, exactly.
So that explains why you see less of the Nestenes themselves. Obviously, you only see a shimmering sort of shape at the end. And then the Autons, maybe there's not enough power to control more than 15 Autons at a time. Because the Master's seen powering up the individual Autons one by one by connecting them directly to the sphere. So it's like, clearly they've not got loads of power. So that makes sense why they're sort of operating undercover this time rather than just having a factory full of Autons waiting ready to go.
They're depleted, aren't they? The Nestene is depleted.
Yeah.
It's not at the level it was in Spearhead.
Yeah.
Which I think makes sense because that's why it needs the Master in this story.
Yeah, and there's no facsimiles either.
No.
Because presumably they take more bandwidth or power. So they have the Master he's operating of his own free will, obviously. 15 Autons in the bus later on, and then they've got Farrell who's under mental control, but I think that's the Master.
Yeah.
They haven't got any kind of facsimile agents like Channing or Scobie walking about, have they?
They don't bother in this one, no.
No.
I thought it was funny because the trouble in part starts because the National Space Museum asked UNIT for something spacey to display.
Yeah.
And
oh, yeah.
the Brigadier signed off on it and was like, yeah, sure, here, have the Nestene energy unit, pop that in a little display cabinet. I mean, like, it's an alien artifact.
Yeah.
What is he doing lending out alien artifacts to the Natural Space Museum?
Yeah.
Not being funny.
It's not the Brigadier's most clever bit, is it?
No, it's not. And the Doctor berates him when he finds out and says, the Brigadier's an idiot. I knew I should have destroyed that thing, but somehow it would have felt like murder. I really like that line.
Yeah, that's a really nice line.
The Doctor didn't want to destroy it, but he obviously wanted it locked away. I mean, the Nestene is such a parasitic alien, isn't it? Like, if you give it enough ground, it will root on the planet. And they were really hard to defeat last time.
Yeah.
And the more time they have to formulate their plans, the more difficult it is to get rid of them, because they infiltrate and grow, and they're quite formidable. And it's definitely, out of all the artifacts the unit they might have in the Black Archive, the Nestene is one that you want a guard on the whole time.
Yeah.
The Master's going to have no problem batting off a bunch of kids who are at this museum for their school trip, as opposed to trying to infiltrate like UNIT or the Black Archive. Although, that said, later on in the story, he does infiltrate UNIT. He just trots down the spiral staircase.
How did you get in here?
Oh, don't be trivial, Doctor.
Oh, don't be trivial, Doctor.
So, yeah, anyway, it's besides the point. Joe tracks down the Master to is it a plastic factory?
The one that he's using to make the Autons.
Yeah, and she's not very good at infiltrating it, because she gets herself caught quite easily.
What I want to know is how she finds it.
Yes, well, I'll explain about him later.
I know.
They then spend most of the following episode trying to find out which factory the Master's based at, and Joe was able to do it immediately.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What I think's funny is that when she gets back from all this, the first thing that Mike asks her is, "Where is the Master?" And the Doctor's like, "Oh, she won't remember that."
Yeah.
And of course she doesn't remember it at all. But yeah, she breaks into the factory. She finds the right factory, and they're in like a warehouse, aren't they? And he's walking with Farrell, the Master, talking about how he's going to take control and change what the factory's been up to. And Joe knocks like a crate off the thing that she's hiding behind, and then they see her.
Yeah, and he ends up hypnotizing her and makes her take like a bomb into UNIT.
Yeah.
And she's like desperate to open it in the Doctor's lab to try and blow everyone up.
Yeah.
Because she's under hypnosis.
Yeah.
She's like, I've got to open it. I've got to.
It's funny that Yates tries to stop her and she just smacks him in the stomach, and then she's able to keep going.
I thought it was quite a sinister performance. Like that she just becomes desperate to kill everyone.
Yeah, it's funny because Joe is like the most danger she puts anybody in is in this episode. So she gets off to a really rocky start, bless her.
Yeah. It was cool though, because there's like in sci-fi, they say that you can't be hypnotized to hurt yourself or other people. But the Doctor explains that in the Master's case, he can, because he's that powerful, he can hypnotize you and make you hurt yourself or others and completely control a human.
Yeah. I like the Doctor. Benton grabs Jo and pulls her away, and the Doctor just picks it up and throws it out of the window.
I'd like to know why Benton, after his life has just been saved, is more worried about the neighbours complaining about the bomb going off outside.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Also, rather conveniently, there's like a river outside the window,
which he's probably never seen again.
I don't think this office is ever seen again. The Doctor's in.
Benton's like, Struth, there's going to be some complaints about that, Doctor. The Doctor's like, you wouldn't be here to receive any complaints.
We have this iconic scene now where the Master debuts his new Auton product to McDermott.
He's very camp, isn't he?
The Master?
Yeah, he
is.
completely roots himself as one of Doctor Who's campest villains in absolutely everything he does in this story.
Yeah, I think they tone it down a little bit, because he gets a bit darker and then he gets more silly again towards the end. But like in this story, he's exceptionally campy, isn't he?
Yeah, so he's...
Yeah. But the whole story is very camp.
It is, to be fair.
Yeah.
He has designed a new plastic inflatable chair. What happened to inflatable chairs? They used to be everywhere. I used to have an inflatable chair.
I did as well. Yeah.
Like a Simpsons one from Argus.
I think I had a blue one that was like transparent, I think.
Yeah, it's sort of gone with that era, isn't it? It's very like a 2000s thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't even function as proper chairs. You can't sit on air comfortably, can you?
Not really.
So they all just ended up in landfill. The Master's chair that he's designed, he's showing it to the factory owner.
Yeah. One of his experimental new line, which we learn is one of several things that are created to try and suffocate people.
Yeah, I really like the line where McDermott touches the chair and he says, it's got a cold, clammy feel to it.
Yeah.
Plastic should be warm and dry. Sit down.
Yeah. It's really funny. So the bit about the chair, that always makes me laugh at, because he's like, McDermott's like, now plastic should be warm and dry. And the master just interrupts him saying, sit down.
It's got a cool, clammy feel to it. Now, plastic should be warm and dry.
Sit down.
It's moving.
No, I will not tolerate his presence.
I actually thought that was quite sinister, because you can imagine that even though it looks like plastic and it might function like plastic, like the Nestene is very much a life form.
Yeah.
So that plastic chair is alive.
Yeah.
It's got skin that's cold and clammy, not like what plastic would feel like, do you know?
Yeah, to be honest with you, when I watched this as a kid, because this was one of the stories that used to be on YouTube. Do you remember when people used to put Classic Who on YouTube in like loads of parts?
Yeah.
And I watched this on YouTube when I first saw this story. And what I likened it to was the bin in Rose. You know, when the bin like melts.
Yeah.
And you can't really see it because the shot where McDermott's struggling, he's trying to lift his hands off the chair, but he can't move his hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the idea is that he does stick to it, or he can't get off it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And that kind of like is added to when you see that other shot, which is really sustained, when the chair like melts over him.
Yeah.
And obviously it's just the chair deflating, but I think the impression is supposed to give it like it's sinking over his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And the shot's really long.
Yeah.
And they got in trouble for that because obviously the shot lingers on his dead body for like 10 seconds or something.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I thought of as the bin in Rose. And whenever I see it now, when I was a kid, I thought, oh, it's like the bin where it melts onto Mickey's fingers.
Even though I do think the chair is a lot more sinister than the bin that burps in Rose.
Well, yeah, they did add that, didn't they? I think that's the thing is that, and you get that first instance of this thing where it's like, and the chair is just like melting. But yeah, it's creepy. I mean, it's silly, but it's also quite creepy as well, to be fair.
I always think
like all the deaths in this, though.
I always think it's a shame as well. In Rose, during that scene, there was meant to be an Auton, like a humanoid Auton that comes and I think he's dressed like a bin man. And he wheels the wheelie bin away because obviously, how does Mickey get to the Nestene's lair?
Oh, they could have done that. They could have put it in like a boiler suit, like the ones in this. I think in the first story,
that was the idea. I don't know why they didn't do that.
It's a shame they didn't do that.
But I'm sure they had a million things to think about during the launch of that. But
probably, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's very prolonged, his death, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really sinister.
Really enough time for you to register what's happened.
You've been suffocated.
And you can see why it would have been thought of as being a bit gruesome for kids to watch it, you know.
So then we meet Farrell Sr.
Yeah.
Who's a miser who's retired from...
He's not a miser. He's supposed to be a sympathetic character.
I didn't sympathise. I thought he was a grumpy
Well, yeah,
arsehole.
he's a bit pissed off because the master's overtaken his company that was left by his son. He's running rings around his son, who's obviously under some sort of influence. You know, he's not really happy about it. All these lines that I'm guessing he set up back in the day that have ran for years, is stopping them to make plastic chairs.
And really ugly dolls.
Yeah.
But it's so funny because the master's acting like he's on an episode of Dragon's Den. He's really trying to sell these products to Farrell Sr.
I think I'd rather hit the bottle than invest in this. I'm out.
Okay, thank you.
And he says, and this is the dolls that we're making as well. And Farrell Sr. is just like, I've nothing to say to you.
Disgusting object.
Yeah, there's no demand for a thing like that. And the master's like, I think you're wrong. And then Farrell Senior's like, well, since you won't be making any more of them, we shan't have a chance to find out.
Yeah.
And the master's desperate for him to take this doll because obviously he knows it's going to kill him.
Yeah.
And ends up just throwing it in the back seat of his car.
Yeah.
And turning up his heating because it's activated by heat.
Yeah, which we don't know yet.
No, but I really like that the master and the Nestene are clearly like experimenting.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of different Auton experiments.
Yeah.
You've got the doll that's activated by heat that will then kill you.
Yeah.
You've got the daffodil activated by CO2 that looks through a mouth and a nose.
It's activated by heat as well with the Bunsen. Yeah.
To cover your mouth with plastic.
Yeah.
And your nose.
I never realised that these are all different ways of killing people that they're trialling, because if obviously they could release inflatable chairs, they could release dolls, and then they do the daffodils, which are given away for free, which makes the most sense. But the master says, doesn't he, like the chair is not going to be used because it takes up too much plastic.
Yeah.
So they're thinking about other ways to do it. And I guess dolls is a good idea. But the thing about this that gets me is the fact that if it had done what it was supposed to do, it would have activated in the car and presumably caused the car to crash and kill him, which is like, that's quite dark as well. But the master doesn't foresee that Farrell will turn the heating down, which he does. And then the doll kind of like goes limp, doesn't it? It deactivates.
It's quite clever because there is like a clear evolution with the Nestene. In its first story, it produces shop window dummies that get shipped out to a certain number of shops that then come to life.
Yeah.
In this story, they're creating these daffodils, they're creating these chairs and that doll and a select number of Autons, and they're sending those out into the world. But then by the time we get to Rose, it's figured out how to just control plastic.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to produce them.
Yeah.
It can just control them.
Actually, that's true, because even with the phone cable, that needs to be specially put there. That's a really good point, Sean, because I never realised that, but that's true. All the stuff in this that the Nestene controls, it's been made for the Nestene, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas in Rose, you're right, it is just any plastic object.
Because the doctor says, breast implants could be controlled by the Nestene.
I think Rose says that. She's like, and the breast implants?
Yeah. Explains to Rose that it can just control anything plastic, and they start getting worried about all the things that it can control, and then Rose is like, and the breast implants.
Yeah.
Think of it. Plastic all over the world, every artificial thing waiting to come alive. The shop window dummies, the phones, the wires, the cables.
The breast implants.
Yeah, so the doll. So the other thing about the doll that's interesting is that when, I think the way they must have animated it is they've got like a rubber suit with a performer inside, and they've like green screened it onto the chair. So what dawned on me with this is that they must have made a human-sized costume for it, presumably. And I've never seen pictures of that, but it must have been hideous to see it life-sized. Do you know? There must be photographs of it standing, or even if it's worn by like a small performer or something, it still would have been scary to see this doll.
Yeah, you're right. I've never seen
pictures of it, because presumably they must have taken some. I hope there are, because it would be really creepy to see it. It never really dawned on me, but they must have done, mustn't they? Because it's not stop motion animated or anything. It's actually a person. It's based off a troll doll, isn't it?
When you wish on a treasure troll, who knows what might happen? Treasure trolls are the only trolls that have a jewel in their tummy that you can wish on. What would you wish for? In
Doctor Who Monsters and Villains, the book, the bit about the Autons has a segment about this doll, and it's called the Troll Doll, and it's never referred to like that in the episode. But that kind of clarifies that it's supposed to be based off those trolls, isn't it?
Yeah, because it is hideous, as a doll line.
Yeah.
Who is that meant to appeal to?
Well, they cover that, don't they? When he takes it home, and Miss Farrell's like, "Oh, it's a doll for adult collectors or something."
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, it's a horrible looking thing. There's something evil about it."
Yeah.
Obviously, we get Farrell Senior's death scene. Clearly, they were very excited about CSO technology in this story because they CSO'd a kitchen
for a split second as well. They didn't need to do that at all.
And bless her. I think it must have been so much harder to act in front of a green screen for that old lady.
Yeah.
Because they must have just had a camera on her in front of nothing and said, "We want you to turn around, put your hands on your cheeks and scream."
The kitchen shot is her turning round, and then she walks through into the main part of the house. That's when she finds Rex.
Why did they CSO a kitchen?
I've got absolutely no idea. And the funny thing is that it probably would have been cheaper just to film it in a house. Do you know, to get a camera into someone's house and film it? But I think Rex's house is a set, isn't it? Sorry, Farrell's house is a set. So they wanted to film it on a set for some reason, which is fine. But the really funny thing is, for the Blu-ray release, they've completely changed that shot. So it's still got Mrs. Farrell turning round, but they've made a more realistic looking kitchen background, which is a complete copy of the CSO like model kitchen that's in this. So they really had attention to detail.
What, like a 3D version or something like that?
I think so, yeah. All the shots of CSO backgrounds, they've replaced them. So there's also the really weird shot of the Master with the Autons powering them up, which is blink and you'll miss it shot again. they've replaced that with a much cleaner looking shot. And it just goes to show that they've put in a lot of effort with the effects, where they've tried to make them feel fitting.
So
they didn't just go completely overboard, except for the squid at the end.
I realised the doll, it would have, because obviously you don't see this, but we learn later. So the doll would have climbed on top of Pharrell Senior and spat on his mouth and nose the plastic, because he suffocates to death. But then the CO2 dissolves that, so there's no evidence, there's no trace of it, and the doll runs away. But then it stopped being activated when it got too cool, so it was just on the floor by the door. She said it was like it was running away.
Yeah,
and
which is creepy.
And he looks like he's had a heart attack. That's what happened, right?
Well, I think it's either the fact that he died of shock from the doll jumping on him, but I think the doll was trying to choke him. That's how I always read that scene.
I'm sure the doctor says later
They died of asphyxiation.
That's how they deliver it. The daffodils in the doll.
Well, the daffodils definitely do. I thought the doll, that caused him to suffocate by choking him to death, but I don't really know. And obviously, it's not obvious, is it?
That's even funnier, though. The visual image of this doll strangling this man.
Because it jumps on him, doesn't it? There's a really quick shot of him like struggling with it on his throat.
Yeah.
But again, it is like a blink and you'll miss it shot, and then he's just dead. So yeah, I don't know. But I think it's creepy how she says that it was like it was trying to get out, the troll doll, like it's trying to get back to the factory or escaped, you know? Oh, it says in the script that it sticks its teeth into his throat. The doll rolls onto its stomach and gets to its feet. It jumps down, and Farrell Sr. spots it running towards him. Mrs. Farrell hears a noise in the kitchen as the vicious doll sinks its pointed teeth into Farrell Sr.'s throat, killing him. So yeah.
But then later they think he's had a heart attack.
Yeah,
so
that's not...
I think this script does add in ad-libs, because there's a line at the end where it says that the master runs over the dead body of Pharrell. I was watching it thinking, I don't think it does that.
I don't think it does that.
Get a move on, slow coach.
I think that if this is taken... They did a few script books in the 90s. We can cut this out. But they did a few script books in the 90s that did add in details like that onto the scripts. So if this is taken from that, I could believe that they've used a bit of artistic license.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So the Doctor tracks the Master's TARDIS down. And is this when he steals his dematerialization circuit?
I just see a so kitchen. Ah! Yeah, so now we're on to the bit when the Doctor goes to the circus and gets himself tied up by Rossellini or whatever he's called.
Mussolini. And Joe smashes a vase over his head because she followed him even though he told her not to.
The strong man, yeah.
Tony the strong man. What a name for a strong man, Tony.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, the actor that plays Tony, he also plays Toveman in Tomb of the Cybermen.
I thought he was familiar.
And I think he's in Doctor Who a couple of times actually. It's nice that he is obviously he's serving. He's working as like a heavy for the circus owner, but while the circus owner's back's turned, he helps himself to all his port. But yeah, Jo knocks him out, doesn't she? She smashes a vase over his head.
Doctor!
What the blazes are you doing here? I told you to stay at headquarters.
Just as well for you I didn't, isn't it?
They think that UNIT have sent a policeman to pick up the Doctor and Jo, so they very trustworthily get into this police car.
Well, they're being attacked by that mob of clowns, aren't they?
The policeman takes them to a quarry.
Yeah, but first we find out from Benton and the Brigadier that it's not an official police car. It's just a black car. So you're like, oh God, what's happened? And they're obviously being kidnapped, being taken away, aren't they?
Because the Doctor's like, excuse me, officer, can I see your warrant card? And the policeman in front of him turns around and he pulls off a mask to reveal a blank plastic face. Really scary.
Excuse me, officer, could I see your warrant card?
Yeah, it's terrifying. That if you're a child watching that, you think, oh my God.
Yeah.
So they got in trouble for this because it made kids scared of policemen.
Right.
So that's not good, is it?
No.
And then in the subsequent episode, they then show a policeman shooting innocent people.
Yeah.
What do you think about the Autons themselves? They look more like crash test dummies, don't they, in this, than mannequins?
I think the Spearhead Autons are creepier, but they're meant to look like shop window dummies.
Yeah.
But these aren't. They don't need to look like shop window dummies. They can just look humanoid.
Yeah.
And wear disguises when they need to.
Yeah.
or put on camp carnival masks to hand out daffodils.
Yeah, I never really realised, but the whole shop window dummies thing,
It's gone.
that's not in this at all, is it?
No.
Because they're basically just androids now in this. They're just plastic androids. But I like that they look like crash test dummies. They are quite creepy, though. They've sort of got a smile on their face.
So we have a very infamous scene now.
Dutch and Joe running away. The Autons get out of the car to try and kill them and grab them. And as that's happening, the Brigadier and Benton arrive, who've been able to follow the police car. They get out, and there's a bit of a scuffle, isn't there? The Brigadier nearly gets shot by one of the Autons.
Yeah.
Who's walking around with the human mask still on. And the other one's got his mask off.
Can I say as well, I think the guns have been given an upgrade.
The Auton ones?
Yeah, because when they fire and it hit one of the soldiers, it's a huge charge that came out of him and he was like dead straight away.
Yeah, they're quite like sparky in Spearhead. But in this, when people get hit by them, there's like a big, there's an explosion, isn't there?
Of smoke and... Yeah, sorry, carry on.
The action stuff in it's quite good, isn't it? The fight scenes. There's this little skirmish now, and then there's the one in part 4. They're both quite good, aren't they? Yates gets into the car and rams the Auton off the side of the cliff.
And it's insane. The stunt man goes tumbling down, like tumble. And it looked like he should have really hurt himself. And I said to you, there's no way that that's a person. And you're like, yeah, it is. And it's quite infamous.
Yeah, because so the idea is in the script, he was supposed to knock him down a little bit and the Auton was supposed to get back up. But he fell further down the cliff than was intended. But that stuntman, he was working for his money because he gets up and starts to go back up the hill like he was scripted to do. But it makes it creepier because it's showing that the Autons are resistant to like damage and stuff.
Yeah.
So even after falling all that way, it still gets up and keeps trying to get back up to the hill, you know.
Yeah, he was injured. It doesn't say how badly. I feel like he should have been.
He probably like
badly.
injured his leg or something, didn't he? Or his like knee or something.
He still managed to get up and finish that shot. And I mean, it's spectacular. I mean, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's quite scary, yeah.
So we're sort of building up now. So we're in the last part and it's all coming to a head now, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that the Master's losing his grip on things a little bit. It was all going so smoothly. And now it's sort of falling apart a little bit. He's ordered Farrell. He's ordered Farrell to distribute these daffodils to the public. So you see, it's really funny. The Doctor finds a receipt for the rental of a
coach.
A coach,
yeah,
with 15 seats.
This is the same when they're in Farrell's office, isn't it? The Doctor and the Brigadier.
They're investigating, yeah.
Yeah.
They find a receipt for a coach, a 15-seater specifically.
Yes.
I like the idea that the Master picked out the clothes that the Autons wear.
Yeah.
Very camped up, like showman costume, bright yellow and...
Yeah, I can't imagine like what the deal was with this, because I feel like obviously they're like promotional outfits, aren't they, for daffodils? But why do they wear those masks? There must be like in the 70s, maybe it was like a promotional thing that people would do where they go around in a coach and like promote stuff. The Brigadier says that they give plastic daffodils away with soap.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the deal is, because obviously to us now, it seems really random that you'd get these costumes doing like promotional tours for things, but maybe it was a thing.
At the time, it must have made sense or been based on something.
It's a bit weird. They're a bit creepy, yeah. They're just called daffodil men, Autons. But yeah, it's a bit bizarre. I mean, know.
It's a great design. Like the masks that they made, these like creepy,
sort of grinning man, aren't they? They're sort of like a smiling, like
in straw hats.
Bizarre.
Yeah, very
really
odd.
Bizarre. But it's funny. So when they find the receipt for the coach initially, the Doctor dismisses it and says maybe he's going on a works outing.
That's camp.
And then there's that great, fantastic bit when the Doctor's trying to open that safe. And they open it, and there's an Auton in there, and it shoots, and the Brigadier's on the other side of the room, and the impact of the thing hits the door, doesn't it?
There's a lot of like really exciting scenes in this story.
Yeah,
like, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
I love that the Doctor and the Brigadier go off on them by themselves.
Yeah.
To investigate this together.
The Brigadier is always such a joy. Like I'm really enjoying watching him in Spearhead and then in this. And when we do watch more of Pertwee, I'm really enjoying seeing the Brigadier. I forget how great Nicholas Courtney is. You just love him, don't you?
You do.
I didn't realise that. So the scene when they're in the car and the Auton gets knocked off the cliff, Yates says to the Doctor, we've got him now. And they reshot it because apparently Richard Franklin's performance was too over the top. And he was grateful for them reshooting it. But he never says we've got him now, does he?
No, it says a sequence near the story's end. So isn't Yates talking about the master?
Oh, maybe, yeah.
When he's like, we've got him now. And then the doctor's like, don't be so sure.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
See, I was paying attention.
They reshot it. We just need to talk about the scene where Farrell says, the Autons that were sent to recover the bodies of the doctor and the girl have escaped. And you're not angry? And the master says, because the doctor's escaped again? No. He's an interesting adversary. I admire him in many ways. Of course. And the more he struggles to postpone the moment, the greater the ultimate satisfaction.
They are so in love.
Even at this early stage.
Yeah. They're definitely giving like X energy.
Yeah, they're just a bit, he's very campy, isn't he? They turn that down a little bit in future stories.
Turn it up. Whack that dial up all the way.
So they're admiring the daffodils, aren't they?
Yes.
And he's like, careful, Farrell, be careful. I don't want an accident.
So this is their next creation, isn't it? The daffodils.
The daffies, yeah.
Yeah, so they give the daffodils away. That's fine.
The master says, yes, well, that's our object. It's to show the world the scale of the modern plastics industry. And then you see some shots of the carnival mask Autons that we don't know are Autons yet, handing out daffodils. It just cuts them, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Walking around the streets and handing them to like extras that are just taking the daffodils away. And then we see them all walking back to the coach. And that's when you realise they made loads of costumes. There's loads of them.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. And then inside the coach, one of the Autons takes his mask off and starts talking.
The only time they talk is in this story, isn't it?
We're ready, Farrell. We must drive to the next distribution center.
No! The master must be obeyed!
And I think it's because they needed someone to talk to Farrell several times while the master's not present. Because he needs to have dialogue about, he keeps on telling them that they need to leave because they're running out of time. And all that the Auton says across several scenes is basically, we're not ready to leave yet. And then it says, we're ready to leave.
We get quite an iconic scene of the master in one of his disguises. He goes into unit dressed up as a telephone engineer whilst the doctor is out investigating the factory with the brigadier.
Yeah.
And Captain Yates, he is inquisitive straight away. He says, who are you? And the engineer is like, telephone engineer, sir, just finishing. Makes him show him his pass.
Yeah.
Which he does have somehow.
Yeah.
And the Yates says, why such a long flex, like such a long wire? Like a telephone wire that he's installing.
Yeah.
And the master's like, specially ordered, sir. Perhaps the gent likes to walk up and down whilst he's talking.
Yeah.
And Yates is like, it sounds very much like him. And then the master's like, that's it then.
Yeah.
And then off he goes.
Yeah, yeah. But that does feel like something the doctor would do.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, what it is, we know now, is the master's replacing the flexor. The Nestene can take control of it and kill him.
They've really branched out their enterprise, haven't they?
They've had a year to think about how can we try and kill the doctor.
Yeah, from shop window dummies and Madden Two Swords to daffodils, the plastic flowers, a kid's doll, telephone wire, a chair.
Yeah.
So, fair play.
Speaking of the doll, I forgot that it has a second attack, doesn't it, on Joe?
Yes.
In the following scene. So Joe has to order some supplies the doctor needs.
Yeah. And she's having a little flirt with the
supply manager.
Yeah. The supplies. Keeping them sweet.
So Yates wants to make some cocoa, doesn't he, for some reason?
What the fuck was that about? I mean, could they not think of something else to get him out of the room? But...
So he goes out to get some supplies. It leaves the Bunsen burner heating up the mug. And the heat from the Bunsen burner activates the troll doll that gets put on the doctor's table. So it tries to jump on Joe, doesn't it?
Yeah. But who looks at the Bunsen burner and the doctor's lab set? That's probably boiled Nestene goo in Spearhead and God knows what else. And thinks I'm going to make hot chocolate in that.
Well,
I mean... Does UNIT really not have adequate kitchen
cafeteria?
facilities?
Yeah.
So she nearly gets killed by Yates's sweet tooth, his cocoa craving.
Yeah.
Beware of the cocoa craving. And he shoots it off of her, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
To be fair, he does come running back in.
He shoots all of its limbs off. We've had the bit about the factory.
Yep.
Where the brigadier shuts the office door and starts looking through the files. The doctor opens the safe, which contains an Auton. The doctor, look out, Auton!
I like that he just slams the door shut again.
Yeah.
And turns the dial. Remarkably persistent, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's great.
So the doctor and the brigadier get back from their little jaunt, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a funny bit where the doctor asks him to explain what happened. Yates tries to avoid telling him that he used his Bunsen burner to heat some cocoa.
He's furious.
Yeah.
Are you trying to tell me that you were going to make cocoa in my lab? This is the lead up to the cliffhanger for part 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Very camp cliffhanger.
Yeah.
The master calls up the doctor.
Yeah.
After he sent everyone out.
Yeah.
And they have phone sex. No, I'm joking. He says, hello, doctor. Is that you?
I love this bit.
Yeah.
Hello, doctor. Is that you? Simply to say goodbye, doctor.
He sends like a little noise down the phone. And that activates the telephone wire.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Like, the effect's interesting because the way the cable wraps around him, it doesn't go around his neck. It goes around like his hands and part of his chest. But yeah, also Pertwee's doing the same thing that he was doing when he was getting attacked by the tentacles in Spearhead.
It's the Pertwee gun.
I don't really know where that comes from because he's so serious and cool. And the minute he gets like, he's in peril, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's fine. It's fine. It's only one cliffhanger anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Brigadier rushes in, doesn't he? Help, Brigadier, help! And yanks the wire out the wall and the wire gets deactivated.
And he uses it as an opportunity to make a catty little comment. He's like, I'm afraid I cut your connection.
There's a really funny line here. The Brigadier and Mike stroll into the office, don't they? And the doctor goes, my word, you look very fierce.
Yeah.
And then the Brigadier says, in a really long string of words, we've located that truckload of Nestene Autons distributing those daffodils, Doctor.
Yeah.
And it looks like Nicholas Courtney's trying not to laugh.
Yeah.
And I just think it's funny because it's like, this show's nuts.
It felt ad-libs, didn't it?
Yeah.
Like the Brigadier stomps in to deliver his line.
Yeah.
But Pertwee saw him and then said that.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. So yeah, he's gearing up an offensive, isn't he, the Brigadier? He's going to strike the Auton caravan. They're all just sort of
the camp little coach
huddling in there, aren't they? They're not really doing anything.
Yeah.
And Farrell tries to leave because he manages to snap out of the hypnosis.
And the Master's not back from unit yet, is he, from the telephone business?
So the Auton just knocks him out. Like, you'll be a useful plot device later. You stay there. That's when the Brigadier says to the Doctor, he's gonna strike the bus. The Doctor tells him not to, but he says no, because if they moved somewhere more densely populated, he won't have that opportunity, and people could get hurt. So he's making the right call.
Yeah.
So the Doctor's under a time limit now to sort this whole thing out.
Doctor and Joe are on their own, aren't they, with the daffodil in the Bunsen burner, and the heat activates it, and it attacks Joe when she leans in towards it. And that's quite scary, isn't it? Because we know that in an earlier scene, the Doctor and Joe are looking at the cells of the daffodil, and its instructions are imprinted on every cell. And when they try and visualize that on a screen, it looks like a person's lower face.
It's a nose and a mouth, isn't it?
Yeah. So clearly it's programmed to activate whenever it detects that shape.
It's a very clever way to set it up, isn't it?
Yeah, and they deduce that when Joe leans towards it, it sprays out a plastic film, which then covers her nose and mouth. And with the Doctor not there, she would have died. And when it detects carbon dioxide, it dissolves, so it destroys the evidence.
Yeah, and it's very harrowing because she's suffocating in front of the Doctor.
Yeah.
And he can't get the plastic that is clinging to her nose and mouth. He can't get it off her face.
Yeah.
And he has quick thinking. He grabs a can of aerosol and sprays that, and it sort of loosens its grip so he can pull it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this daffodil is triggered by radio waves this time. So we've had heat triggers. This one's triggered by radio waves, and it searches then when it's activated for a mouth and a nose.
Yeah.
And very, very harrowing.
Yeah, and I think because as well it's so prolonged, and it's just shown bluntly is Katie Manning's mouth and nose covered by this plastic. It's like, it just makes you feel a bit sick. It's not very nice.
We don't actually see UNIT retrieve the Nestene energy source, do we?
The ball?
Yeah.
They don't have it. It stays now in, the Master puts it in the radio telescope, doesn't he?
Does it blow up in there then?
I don't think that happens. I think you don't really see what happens to it at the end.
No, because you want to lock that up after all this again.
Yeah.
Because that's when the Master just comes striding down the spiral staircase.
Yeah.
And just says, "Good afternoon, Doctor," holding his weapon. So he says, "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." And this is their first proper confrontation, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is quite an iconic scene.
Oh, yeah.
And the Doctor thinks that the Master's there to kill him.
Yeah.
But it's not as straightforward as that.
No.
The Doctor is Sherlock to the Master's Moriarty, and there'd be no fun in just killing him. He wants to toy with him.
Yeah.
It's a really clever, well-written scene that completely sets up their relationship for the future. You know exactly the Master's motivations. It's not just to kill the Doctor.
No, it's to like toy with him.
Yeah.
I like that he says, "You've come here to kill me, of course." And the Master's like, "But not without considerable regret."
Yeah. Oh, Joe bungles in and they have a standoff.
Oh, yeah.
And the Doctor reveals he's got his dematerialization circuit. So he can't fire his weapon.
No.
Because he'll destroy that and the Master will be stuck on Earth.
They end up with they end up in Bessie, don't they, with the Master. The Master grabs them and takes them to where the coach is parked. Because he knows that if the Doctor and Joe are in there, the Brigadier can't bomb the coach.
Yeah, that was quite clever. It's so funny the way that Bessie, like, it's quite a bumpy ride across that field.
Yeah.
I mean, the three of them look like they're holding on for dear life. And I think Bessie needs some shock absorbers.
Then there's the bit where the Doctor and Joe get tied up in the coach, don't they? The Master snatches a dematerialization circuit off the Doctor. And then while he's talking about the plan with the Autons, the Doctor and Joe decide that they're going to press the brake pedal in like Morse code to send a signal to the Brigadier, who they know is watching. And through pressing this brake pedal off and on, in about 30 seconds, the Doctor manages to send the message, "Daffodils are lethal, activated soon, destroy immediately, guard radio research station," with one, in one go.
Yeah.
And And
there's a really prolonged shot of Pertwee lying on the floor and he's just bumping like... like with every little tap, he's decided to jolt his body. Very long message. Very impressive. I feel like he could have said that in fewer words, for sure. Like SOS, guard radio station, destroyed daffodils.
Right, it gets everything out there, because when the coach then goes to the radio station, the unit are waiting for them, aren't they?
Yeah, this is when the Master's plans have truly fallen apart by this point. And
the Autons weirdly negative, like he's given up about the situation, isn't he? The Autojets are being destroyed. It's too late. 2 humans have escaped. And the Master's like, "No, get out there, all of you." It's like he's given up.
The Autons, they're glass half empty. And the Master's glass half full. It's all futile. And this is what I mean. Like, the Autons are so sidelined.
Yeah.
And it's, this is what I meant when I said this is more of a Master story. Because you're sort of following him now.
Yeah.
As he scrambles to the radio telescope.
Yeah.
And that guy comes down the stairs as the Master is ascending. He just throws him off.
He's the unluckiest guy in the world, isn't he?
I mean, and it's not a short fall. There's about 3 shots of this guy just plummeting.
Yeah. It's quite scary.
And then splat on the floor.
It reminds me of, those creepy 70s information films about electricity that they used to show?
Yeah.
So there's one when a kid is trying to get a Frisbee. Did they show you that at school?
No.
It's awful. And this kid tries to get this Frisbee and then they get zapped and they fall really far off the camera. And obviously in that instance, it's a special effect. But in this one, they actually it's a real person, isn't it? Jumping off the building like a stunt person, I'm imagining. And it's not, they're not jumping off the telescope, but it's made to look like they are. Do you know?
Yeah.
And it's quite harrowing, yeah. It's quite creepy, because normally in classic Who, you get a shot of a wooden stick figure, wouldn't you, or something falling. But yeah.
The Brigadier sees that and he says, "Benton, get a stretcher party."
Yeah.
I'm thinking, don't bother.
He's had it, mate. Yeah.
Ring the morgue, because that guy's not walking away from that. The Master and the Doctor have their final confrontation in the telescope control room.
While the unit are fighting the Autons, getting out of the coach.
Whilst they're fighting the Autons. It's a really cool climax. So the Master actually manages to send the signal to the Nestene, and it sort of phases in.
Yeah. And
the Doctor convinces the Master that the Nestene won't distinguish between humans and the Master, so the Master's fucked as well if it gets there.
Yeah.
And that one line, the Master's like, "Shit."
Yeah.
reverse it, you know?
Yeah,
He's like,
it all happens very quickly, doesn't it? That ending.
yeah.
And obviously it's only the Master's first appearance. So it's a shame that they felt they need to make the Master help the Doctor. Like, why can't the Master just escape? But he actively tries to stop the Nestene after he spent 4 episodes trying to get them there.
So yeah, you're right. He could have just legged it.
But also, if he didn't help the Doctor destroy the Nestene, there's the chance the Nestene might have got there and then destroyed the planet or killed everyone, you know? So that makes sense. But yeah, so the Nestene in this story is represented by like a shimmering shape that vaguely looks octopus-like. But that's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? It's just like appendages, like a tentacle sort of shape.
It was just little green dots, wasn't it?
It was like a shimmering sort of silvery shape.
Yeah.
What do you think about the special edition where they replaced it with like an actual squid, but it's just green?
I mean, I still don't imagine that's what the Nestene looks like.
No.
So it just looked like a giant squid.
Yeah.
But like the spearhead, you know, the tentacles that came out of that.
Yeah.
And the Doctor compared it to a squid.
Yeah.
I imagined something a lot more sinister and alien.
Yeah.
But then they took that really literally for the special edition, and they were like, let's actually put in a squid.
It's kind of like a realistic squid, isn't it? With like long kind of like scyther sort of hands. It looks a bit like an Architeuthis. Do you like a giant squid?
Yeah.
With like hooked tentacles. If you Google Doctor Who and the Auton invasion, you'll see the cover, and I think you should do that now, actually.
Okay.
Because then you'll get to see what I think the Nestenes look like.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
So on the cover of that, it's octopus-esque, isn't it? Doctor Who Auton invasion.
But it's alien. It looks alien.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what I imagine. And then actually, yeah, sorry. So if you look at there's an example here where the Terror of the Autons book, that's like, it's like a squid, but it's got a massive eye and it's very alien looking. That feels like a bit more like what they probably intended.
Yeah.
Whereas I like the giant squid effect, but I think it's a bit too modern looking.
It just looks a bit too much like
a squid
of the Earth.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
then
agree.
the Master does leg it after they manage to fling the Nestene back into space.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound like a very permanent solution, even though it seemed to have worked until 2005.
Yeah.
They had 35 years of peace and quiet, and then the Nestene decided to come back.
Yeah.
The Master tries to escape, comes up with a really cunning plan, actually. Manages to quickly dress up Farrell.
Yeah.
And he looks like the Master, comes out wielding a gun and goes to shoot everyone. The Autons are all dead by this point. They've all dropped.
Yeah, because when they shoot the Nestene into space, they all sort of faint again.
Yeah, the signal dies.
Yeah.
And they all shoot at what they think is the Master. It's Yates, who's feeling a bit smug and says, well, that's the end of him. And then the Doctor's like, don't be too sure, and pulls off the mask, and it's just Farrell dressed up as the Master.
Yeah.
But so the Master escaped. Oh, he escapes in the coach, doesn't he?
Yes, he tries to run them over.
Yeah, that was funny.
But then he fails to do that, and then he just drives off. And I always think when I see this, you can't exactly get far in a red and yellow coach that says "Plastic comes to town" on it, can you? It's a bit conspicuous.
I suppose he only needs to get to his TARDIS in his mind.
Yeah, true. That's true, actually. Yeah.
Canonically, what happens to the Master now? He gets into his TARDIS. He installs this dodgy circuit. It doesn't work. So is he still in the horse box by the time he comes back?
Yeah, so you don't see the horse box TARDIS again, I don't think, because it can still change its appearance. It just can't fly anywhere.
Can it move?
So but it's trapped on Earth.
Okay.
So they reference it in dialogue, don't they? The Master can't escape, the Doctor says, but he is trapped on Earth, and he apologises for that. And then when the Brigadier asks him if he thinks he'll try again, the Doctor says, yes, definitely. As a matter of fact, I'm rather looking forward to it.
Doctor, people died.
Yeah, I know. He's a bit airy-fairy about the whole thing, isn't he?
He's a murderer, and you're looking forward to having your next encounter.
Yeah. So that's that. And then, but then in The Mind of Evil, which is the following story, you realise it's a while till they see him again. There's a time jump. A little time jump anyway.
So the story after this is Mind of Evil.
Yeah.
And he's in that.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
That's the one where he's like a crime boss with his cigars.
Oh, that's
good story. Cool. Yeah, it's a good story.
So, all right then. So, yeah, that was a good story though. Really enjoyed it. It rocketed by, and I'd give that 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Terror. I think Spearhead is better, I think, but they're both really strong. And I was never sure which one I preferred. I like all the monsters and all the fun stuff in Terror, but I think Spearhead's probably the better story to me personally. I'd give Spearhead a 10, and I probably would give Terror about an 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the general consensus is that Terror is more of like a gaudy remake of Spearhead. People seem to be quite mixed about which one's better, but I think people do think Spearhead's the classier of the two. But they're both really good stories, aren't they?
Yeah,
just very
fantastic.
different stories, you know.
It's a great introductory story for Joe.
Yeah.
And a great introductory story for the Master.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was top notch. I really enjoyed that.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's a great season opener.
So we are going to complete sort of the Auton trilogy because we're not sure if The Big Bang counts as an Auton story.
I think having watched it the other day, no.
So we're going to complete that with Rose. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yes.
And we'll have a proper chat about it as a standalone story.
Yeah, because we sort of skirted around it a bit, didn't we, in our previous episode where we talked about Rose because it was our opening episode.
What are you going to draw for this?
2 Autons, one carrying the ball and one with his hand open.
With the caravan behind it.
Oh, gosh. I'll try.
Okay.
Cars are really hard to draw.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it.
And
Sean, there's really one more important thing we need to talk about before we end this podcast.
Yeah.
What do you think about the Japanese cover for Terror of the Autons?
Okay, it's loading. Hold on. I need to refresh.
Okay.
What the fuck? What the fuck is that?
I know.
That's for Terror.
Yeah.
Who's she? Why has she got an octopus tentacle coming out of her arm?
It's the Nestene.
Why is the Nestene hot?
Well, she's an Auton, isn't she? But she's got a Nestene inside her. And that's why there's a tentacle coming out of her arm.
When did that happen?
Don't know. Do you want to read this version of Terror of the Autons?
I'm going to download that to my Kindle. Blimey. Okay, well, on that note.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, until the next time. My God.